If you haven't heard recently, the United States Congress just passed the Cheese Act, and this was really important because it passed with an overwhelming majority. Apparently, Congress is very pro-Vallone. We're going to talk about the legislative branch, and this is Congress. This is what we talk about when we talk about Congress. The first article in the Constitution, the first branch discussed. Now, we have what's called a bicameral legislature, and what that means is we have two houses. We have our House of Representatives, and then we have our United States Senate. Now, to be a member of the House of Representatives, you have to be 25 years old, you serve a 2-year term, and you have to be a resident of the state in which you are going to represent. Being a 2-year elected official, it doesn't seem like you have a long time to govern, especially when Congress meets and a congressional term is a 2-year term. And so you're constantly up for re-election. Now, there are 435 of these total spread out across the United States, and they're given to each state based on population. So if one state is larger than the other, they're going to have more members of the United States House of Representatives. Similarly, if you're the smallest or one of the smallest states, you might only have one representative total. Now, the Senate's a little different because for the Senate, there are 100 senators total, 2 for each state. So each state gets one regardless of the population. California, our most populous state, has 2 senators, and Wyoming, our least populous state, has 2 senators. Now, to be a senator, you have to be 30 years old, still live in the state that you want to represent, but your term is 6 years in length. So think about that. If you're a member of the House, you're running for re-election every 2 years. But if you're a senator, you get a little bit more time to enact a legislative agenda. Now, this is done for 2 reasons. First, the House of Representatives is supposed to be the House that's most representative to the people. In other words, if the people are unhappy and want change, the House of Representatives is where you go to get it. Whereas the Senate, on the other hand, the Senate has slightly different roles. They're supposed to be representative of the state as a whole. So not a particular district, but the state's needs. So for some stability, the idea is giving senators a little bit longer of a term. So does that ever change? Well, the Senate is always going to be comprised of 100 people, and the House is always going to be comprised of 435 people. So how do we know when some states get more populated than others? Well, after a census every 10 years, all of those congressional lines get redrawn, and we have what's called redistricting. This is where your particular district might have grown in size and it might have shrunk a little bit, and so lines are redrawn to accommodate for all of that. Now, this gets us into gerrymandering, which is the idea that lines are drawn in favor of one political party over the other, and that's a big debate, and I encourage you to read from one of the following sources if you're interested in that kind of thing. But largely, redistricting is going to come with its fair share of controversy, but nonetheless, it has to happen so that we can maintain equal representation, or as close as we can, across the United States. So what are the powers of Congress? Well, they can tax, they declare war, they regulate interstate commerce, and both are involved in that kind of thing. Where the Senate and the House break a little bit in terms of their individual respective roles, think about this. When we talk about impeachment, and we talk about impeachment in the executive branch chapter as well, but if the House of Representatives and the Senate, if we have 2 branches, what are their individual roles? Well, if a president is going to be impeached, that comes from the House of Representatives, but that doesn't mean he's removed from office. The Senate has to try those articles of impeachment. So in order for a president to be removed from office, the Senate also has to vote by an overwhelming majority, a 2/3 majority, to remove him, while the House of Representatives just has to have a simple majority to remove him from office. Senators also are important because they confirm judges, they confirm the cabinet secretaries, they confirm ambassadors. So again, you can kind of see, why would a senator have a 6-year term? The founders wanted a little bit more stability in that particular body. Let the House of Representatives be super responsive to the people. Every time that we have a new election, something new can come up, but the Senate was designed to be a little bit more deliberative, a little bit more stable, as it were. Now, when we talk about incumbency, what does incumbent mean? An incumbent is just the current representative, the person that's wanting to run for re-election. There is an incredible advantage to being an incumbent. First of all, you get what's called the franking privilege, which you can send out mail for free. So if you want to communicate with the people of your district, you can tell them what's going on in Washington, and the post office picks up that cost. Your challenger, the guy that wants to unseat you, doesn't have that opportunity. But think about other things like name recognition, credit claiming. Something good happens, you get to claim credit for that. All of those work together to help the incumbents win. How likely is an incumbent to win? Well, in the House of Representatives, it's about 90% likely that you're going to win re-election if you're the incumbent. And in the Senate, it's a little less, but it's still about 70%. That's a remarkable amount of times that an incumbent, somebody who's already in the position, gets reelected. Now, Congress's most important role, lawmaking, and you think, how does a bill become a law? Do we just walk into Congress and say, here's my idea, and everybody votes right then and there? Well, not quite. The first thing that happens is your particular piece of legislation is given to a committee. So if you want to do something about the highway system, it's given to the committee that deals with transportation. And even then, that particular piece of legislation could be given to the subcommittee within the committee that deals with highways. So it's voted on in a subcommittee. Then it's voted on again in the full committee. Then it has to go to the House of Representatives for a whole floor vote. Everybody has to vote on it. Then it pops over to the Senate, goes through its committee structures again, gets voted on there before it even attempts to cross the president's desk. Now, I encourage you to look in your book for a little bit more detailed approach to how this bill would become a law, but it gives you an idea that taking a bill, taking an idea and making it a law is very difficult. It's a very complex process. Ultimately, Congress passes those laws, they oversee the president, and they even oversee the courts, and lastly, they represent you, the people. The best way to effect change is through your representatives. This is how the founders set it up. So the best thing you can do is learn who is your representative. Call them, email them, write a letter, discuss your preferences for what you want Washington to look like. The best way to effect change is to reach out to them directly, and then they'll listen to you.